War in Europe, 1944. In Italy, the British 10th Corps attacks the Gustav Line and the Battle of Monte Cassino begins. The US 36th Infantry Division suffers 2,000 casualties when attempting to cross the Gari River near Monte Cassino, Italy. Bypassing the strong German defences on the Gustav Line, the Allies land at Anzio. They are unable to break out of the beachhead. In an attempt to break out of the Anzio beachhead, 3 US Ranger battalions find themselves in the middle of a German counterattack. From one Ranger battalion of 767 men, only 6 return. The historic monastery at Monte Cassino, thought to be an enemy strongpoint, is bombed. When the bombing stops, the Germans occupied the ruins. The Germans, with new Mark V Panther tanks and heavy tank destroyers, counterattack at the Anzio beachhead. Repeated German assaults are beaten back by Allied artillery. The battle for Monte Cassino continues. The small town of Cassino is destroyed by Allied bombers, making it impassable for tanks. In reprisal for the killing of 28 German SS officers by partisans, 335 citizens of Rome and political prisoners are executed. Over Nuremberg on a moonlit night, RAF Bomber Command lost 96 heavy bombers. A D-Day training exercise off the coast of Devon ends tragically when landing craft are attacked by German E-boats. US troops, not yet fully trained, abandon ship wearing full packs. This makes the men top heavy. They turn upside down in the sea and many drown. Almost 700 US soldiers lost their lives, but 130 men were saved by LST 515, whose skipper disobeyed orders not to go back to pick up survivors. Heavy Allied bombing of Europe continues in preparation for D-Day. The 2nd Polish Corps attacks the Gustav Line near Cassino. Troops of the 2nd Polish Corps capture Monte Cassino. They raise the Polish and British flags on the ruins of the monastery. Allies at Anzio break out of the bridgehead and link up with those from southern Italy. The Germans retreat from Anzio and establish a new defensive line south of Rome, the Caesar Sea Line. Following the Battle of Monte Cassino, French-Moroccan colonial troops commit mass rape on Italian women and girls and murder civilians. The biggest armada the world has ever assembled sets sail for the beaches of Normandy. The weather deteriorates, the Admiralty issues a gale warning, and the D-Day invasion of Europe is postponed. The Allies enter Rome. The people of Rome crowd into the streets cheering. The weather improves and the invasion fleet heads for Normandy. Operation Overlord has begun. 6th of June 1944. Minutes after midnight, gliders crash land within 100 yards of the Pegasus Bridge to capture and hold until reinforcements arrive. In the darkness of the early hours over France, paratroopers jump from transport planes and plummet into enemy-held territory. Offshore from the Normandy beaches, designated Sword, Juno, Gold, Utah and Omaha, ships of war are at action stations. In the half-light of pre-dawn, from transport ships, men clamber into landing craft. Thousands of Allied aircraft drop bombs on enemy coastal positions. Most miss their targets and fall too far inland. British and American ships open fire on enemy gun emplacements. Amphibious tanks swim towards the shore. The rough seas cause many to sink or arrive after the troops have landed. American Rangers scramble ashore at Point du Hoc. Using grappling hooks and ladders borrowed from London Fire Brigade, they climb up the cliffs under heavy fire, only to find the artillery casements are empty. Operation Overlord, the biggest amphibious military operation in history, is successful. But at Omaha Beach, the Americans have a particularly hard time. All but 2 of their amphibious tanks had sunk, and the area had been recently reinforced by highly trained German troops. The successful D-Day landings were only the beginning of the liberation of Europe. there would be many hard-fought battles to come. The heavily defended German strongpoint Hillman delayed the British but is finally captured. The French town of Bayeux is liberated by the British. In an indecisive battle, the British attack and are forced to withdraw from Villers-Bocage. The first of Hitler's terror weapons, the V-1 rocket, devastates the streets of London. Known to the British as doodlebugs because of the noise they made, 2,452 more V-1s would flatten parts of London and the south-east in the following weeks. A severe storm severely damages the Mulberry Harbours. Using parts from the American Mulberry Harbour, the British harbour at Arromanches is repaired. Operation Bagration, the Russian summer offensive, results in the destruction of German Army Group Centre. Estimates of German casualties are up to 500,000. Operation Epsom, delayed by storm damage to the Mulberry Harbours, 60,000 British and Canadian troops with 600 tanks attacked the German front. Allied strategy is to draw the German panzer divisions to the British, allowing the Americans to break out to the west. By the end of June, every panzer division in Normandy was concentrated on the British and Canadian front. While the US and British Navy pound Cherbourg from seaward, the 4th, 9th and 79th US Infantry Divisions fight their way through formidable fortifications and fierce resistance to seize Cherbourg. The Battle of the Hedgerows begins. The French Bocage, an area of small fields, high hedgerows and sunken lanes, proves to be particularly difficult fighting terrain. Hedgerow cutters are devised by tank crews. Made from the steel of beach defences, they are welded to the front of tanks to cut through the hedgerow banks. Operation Windsor. The Battle of Caen begins, with Canadian troops attacking and capturing Cap UK Airport. The 12th SS Hitler Youth Panzer Division cold-bloodedly murdered many Canadian prisoners of war. British and Canadian troops capture Caen. Expected to be captured on the first day of the Normandy landings, Caen had proven a hard nut to crack. Field Marshal Rommel was seriously wounded when his car was attacked by British fighter bombers. Operation Goodwood. Preceded by a massive aerial bombardment, 3 British army divisions pushed deep into enemy territory. 140 British tanks are destroyed. Although a breakout was not achieved, the operation kept the German panzer divisions focused on the British sector. The Battle of St. Lo would destroy 90% of the city. The body of Major Howie, who died of his wounds, was placed on the hood of the lead jeep, symbolically making him the first American soldier to enter the city. American forces liberate Livorno in Italy. Assassination attempt by German army officers to blow up Hitler fails. The plotters and their families are shot, hanged, viciously strangled with piano wire and hung up on meat hooks. Implemented in the plot, to save his family, Rommel is forced to commit suicide. Majdanek in Poland, largely undestroyed, is the first concentration camp to be liberated by the Allies. Operation Cobra. While the British engaged the Germans around Caen, to the west, the 1st US Army, under Lieutenant General Bradley, breaks through the German defences. US bombers blasting a hole through the enemy front lines bomb their own positions and kill many US troops, including the Chief of US Ground Forces, Lieutenant General McNair. The German Comet, the first rocket-powered fighter aircraft, begins flying operational missions. To support the US breakout following Operation Cobra, Montgomery launches Operation Bluecoat, keeping the German panzer divisions fixed on the British. The Polish Home Army uprising in Warsaw begins. Breaking out of the treacherous Bocage country, US troops reach Avranches. Florence is liberated by Allied troops. Before retreating, the Germans destroy historically significant buildings and bridges. Following the Warsaw Uprising, 40 to 50,000 resistant fighters and civilians are murdered by the Germans in the Wola district of Warsaw. The Canadians launch Operation Totalize to capture the high ground north of Falaise. 1st Canadian Army and 1st Polish Armoured Division launch Operation Tractable to capture Falaise. The Russian offensive in the Balkans begins with an attack on Romania. The Falaise pocket is closed when Canadian and Polish units made contact with US troops. German losses are 10 to 15,000 killed and 40 to 50,000 taken prisoner. 344 tanks, self-propelled guns and armoured vehicles are destroyed. Hitler issues orders to destroy Paris. Lieutenant General von Choltes disobeys Hitler's orders. Paris is liberated. Under sniper fire, Charles de Gaulle and the Free French parade triumphantly down the Champs-Élysées. Canadian troops, with revenge in mind for their defeat in 1942, capture Dieppe. Wisely, the German defenders have fled. Brussels is liberated by the British Second Army. Antwerp is liberated by the British 11th Armoured Division. Without maps, running out of fuel and ammunition, the British Second Army's charge through France runs out of momentum. Ostend is liberated by Canadian troops. The first successful operation launch of German V-2 rockets takes place with 2 launched at London and 1 at Paris. There is no defence against the V-2 rocket. Luxembourg is liberated by the US First Army. The first Allied troops set foot on German soil at Aachen. Expecting Holland to be liberated in days, Dutch railway workers go on strike. The Germans' response is to divert all food away from Holland, resulting in the hunger winter and the starvation of tens of thousands of Dutch people. US troops reach the fortified German Siegfried Line. Operation Market Garden. Thousands of airborne troops land behind enemy lines in a bold attempt to capture the Rhine bridges and shorten the war. The 1st Canadian Army captures the heavy fortified port of Boulogne. Operation Market Garden fails and the British troops pull out of Arnhem. Of the 10,000 airborne troops involved, 8,000 are killed or captured. Russian troops capture Estonia. Calais surrenders to Canadian troops. The Warsaw Uprising ends. The Polish Home Army, having run out of ammunition and without help from the Russians, surrender to the Germans. The 1st Canadian Army is ordered to clear the Germans from the banks of the Scheldt to allow shipping into the undamaged port of Antwerp. Always wet and cold, the Canadians fought in atrocious conditions. The terrain was flat, boggy, flooded, and dissected by ditches and canals. The enemy held every high point. British troops liberate Athens. Even though he was forced to commit suicide, Field Marshal Rommel is buried with full military honours. Desperate for fighting men, Hitler orders a call-up of all remaining German men. They are poorly trained and have no uniform. Protected by the Siegfried Line, after 19 days of fighting, Aachen is captured by the Americans. The city would be the first on German soil to be occupied by the Allies. To free the approaches and open up the port of Antwerp, British commandos land on Vulcan Island. The Canadian First Army forces the crossing of the Scheldt at Flushing. Canadian troops take Zeebrugge. Belgium is now completely liberated. Under enemy artillery fire, minesweepers from Wildfire 3 enter the Scheldt and in the biggest, most complex and dangerous minesweeping operation of World War II, clear the approaches to the port of Antwerp. V-2 rockets rain down on England and would continue to do so until their launch sites are overrun. After repeated heavy bombings, the German battleship Tirpitz is sunk. 32 RAF Lancasters drop Tallboy 12,000-pound bombs. 2 are direct hits and the Tirpitz rolls over and sinks. The first ships carrying men, tanks, guns, fuel and ammunition dock at Antwerp, right on the front line. The British Home Guard, Dad's Army, is disbanded. In the coldest winter in living memory, the Battle of the Bulge begins. 5th and 6th Panzer Army of 200,000 men and 1,000 tanks breaks through the wooded Ardennes to take the Allies by surprise. Montgomery's British 30 Corps immediately turns to attack from the north, while the US Third Army attacks from the south. At Normandy, SS troops murder 84 American prisoners. At Bastogne, US troops are surrounded but gallantly hold on. Running low on ammunition and food, the Germans demand their surrender. Brigadier General McAuliffe's reply is, "Nuts." The skies clear over the Ardennes, and the RAF and US AAF pound the German armoured divisions. General George Patton's Third Army relieves Bastogne. Having not achieved their objective and without fuel, the German army abandons its vehicles and retreats back to Germany.